Why was her hand trembling when no one else seemed to notice? The briefing room hummed with low voices, the rustle of paper maps, the soft tapping of keyboards. Men and women in uniform leaned over the long table, faces washed in pale fluorescent light, their attention fixed on satellite images spread like puzzle pieces. And there she was, sitting near the end of the table, fingers wrapped tight around a pen that never touched her notebook. They thought her silence was discipline. They thought her stillness meant calm. But inside, every second stretched against her chest like a weight pressing down. She wasn't afraid of the mission. Fear was something she'd learned to manage years ago. What unnerved her was simpler, sharper, something she had carried into this room that no one else knew about, a secret. And if the wrong person ever sensed it, if the wrong ear overheard the wrong word, this mission wouldn't just collapse, it would burn, all of them. Her name was Captain Alina Marlowe, callsign, Ash. She'd earned it not because she liked fire, but because of what remained after it. Quiet, gray, resilient. That was how her squad described her. She had led teams before. She had made the kind of choices that earned medals no one wanted to talk about. And yet tonight, she felt the weight of something different pressing against her ribs. The colonel cleared his throat at the front of the room. His voice had that clipped, measured tone that tried to carry authority, but Alina wasn't listening to the strategy points anymore. She knew the layout. She knew the flight path, the drop zone, the comms schedule. What she couldn't shut out was the echo in her mind, the whisper of a promise she had made months ago, one she had no right to keep but couldn't abandon either. Captain Marlowe, the colonel's voice cut across the hum. Her head snapped up. Your team will insert on the north approach. You'll have the high ground, eyes and cover for the convoy. She nodded once, steady, precise. Not a flicker of hesitation showed, at least not to them. But the pen in her hand still trembled. After the briefing, the team gathered near the lockers. Jokes surfaced, dry, nervous humor, the kind that soldiers clung to before stepping into uncertainty. Alina listened. She smiled once or twice. But when Sergeant Reyes nudged her shoulder, his grin fading as he searched her face, she knew he'd noticed the crack she'd tried to hide. "You good, Cap?" he asked quietly. She forced her voice steady. "Yeah, just running it through my head again." Reyes nodded, though his eyes lingered a moment too long. Then he walked off to prep his kit. Alina stood there for a beat longer, her fingers brushing the insignia stitched onto her uniform sleeve. The fabric was rough beneath her touch. It anchored her, reminded her of who she was supposed to be. But beneath that layer of duty, another memory stirred. A letter she had folded and hidden deep inside her rucksack. A letter she had written but never sent. A confession. One that explained why her hesitation tonight wasn't fear. It was something heavier. The aircraft engines roared hours later, vibrating through the metal floor as the team strapped in. Darkness pressed against the fuselage, broken only by the red glow of overhead lights. Alina checked her rifle, her gear, every motion rehearsed and precise. The others did the same, some mouthing silent prayers, others tapping photos taped inside helmets. Corporal Diaz leaned forward, shouting over the noise. "Cap, you ever get tired of this part, the waiting?" She almost smiled. "It's the only part we control." But even as she said it, her chest tightened. Because there was one part she couldn't control, the moment her secret would collide with the mission. When the green light blinked, the team moved. Wind tore against them as they dropped into the night, parachutes snapping open like the sudden breath of the earth itself. The ground rushed up, shadowed and uneven, the cold seeping into bones the moment boots struck soil. They regrouped quickly, weapons raised, eyes scanning the ridgelines. Silence, just the hiss of wind through trees, the crunch of gravel underfoot. Alina gave the hand signal, "Move." The convoy they were protecting wouldn't arrive for another 40 minutes. That was time to set up overwatch positions, time to breathe, time, unfortunately, to think. She lay prone on the ridge, scope sweeping over the valley below. The glass reflected faint light back into her eye, sharp, clear. But the clearer the image became, the more blurred her mind felt. She had been here before, in deserts, in cities, in mountains. Each time she carried her weapon, her team, her orders. But never before had she carried a truth that could undo it all. It had started months ago, during a mission no one talked about anymore. The files were sealed. The after-action report had been a neat summary of chaos. But Alina remembered every sound, every scream, every choice. And she remembered the man they hadn't recovered. A man the official report had erased with two cold words, presumed KIA. Except he was. And that was the weight pressing against her chest tonight. Somewhere ahead, beyond the ridge, beyond the convoy's path, he was alive. She knew it. She had heard his voice once, faint, distorted, buried in static over an encrypted frequency that shouldn't have existed. A call for help that no one else had heard. A ghost signal. She hadn't told anyone. Not command. Not her team. Not even Reyes, though he was the closest thing she had to a brother. And now, lying on this ridge with her scope sweeping the dark, she knew tonight might be the night she saw him again. Alive, or worse. Down below, headlights flickered in the distance, the convoy approaching, 3 armored vehicles rumbling along the dirt road like slow-moving shadows. Alina steadied her breathing, eyes scanning the tree line. Any moment now, the silence could break. Any moment, the mission could fracture into chaos. Her finger brushed the trigger guard, steady, but her heart wasn't steady. Not tonight, because tonight wasn't just about protecting a convoy. Tonight was about a choice she couldn't explain, a secret she couldn't share. And when the first muzzle flash erupted from the valley floor, lighting the dark in sudden violence, Alina knew the moment had come faster than she wanted, faster than she was ready for. The night cracked open, shouts, gunfire, the sharp ping of rounds striking metal. Her team moved disciplined, precise, shadows shifting to cover to return fire. Reyes barked a command into comms. Diaz cursed under his breath. The convoy accelerated, engines howling. Alina's scope locked onto a figure in the tree line. She exhaled, squeezed, and the figure dropped. Another target appeared and she shifted smoothly, years of training guiding her every motion. But beneath the rhythm of combat, a different sound rose in her ears, a memory, a voice, his voice. She froze just for half a second. It wasn't possible, it couldn't be, not here, not now. But she had heard it. Through the crackle of gunfire, through the chaos, a single word echoed faint across her comms channel, her name. Lash. Her blood went cold. She blinked hard, forcing her finger back to the trigger, forcing her mind back to the fight. But the damage was done. The secret she had carried, the truth she had buried, it was here now, rising from the dark. And with it came a question she wasn't ready to answer. What happens when the mission you're ordered to complete collides with the promise you swore never to break? Was she losing her mind, or had she really heard it? The word still echoed in her headset, faint and impossible, like a voice pulled from a dream. Ash. Her call sign, her name, spoken in a tone that didn't belong to anyone on this channel. Her rifle steadied against her shoulder, but her thoughts scattered. Combat demanded clarity, sharper than a blade, faster than instinct. But her heart had seized, her breath caught in her throat. Cap left flank, Reyes barked through the comms. She snapped back, squeezed the trigger. A muzzle flare cut the dark, target down. The rifle kicked against her shoulder, grounding her in reality. She forced her body into rhythm again. Aim, breathe, fire. Movement, cover, scan. But every beat was off-tempo now, every decision dragging beneath the weight of one question. Was it him? The convoy below surged forward, armored engines straining against the dirt track. Bullets sparked against plating, ricocheting into the night. Her team moved like shadows, firing from the ridge, holding the high ground. They had the advantage. They had control. And still, her ears strained past the gunfire, desperate for another fragment of that voice. Minutes bled into a haze of chaos. Then, as suddenly as it had erupted, the firefight thinned. The tree line went quiet. Shadows melted into silence. Whoever had tried to ambush the convoy was gone, retreating into the darkness. Clear, Diaz's voice rang out. Alina kept her scope trained longer, her finger tight on the trigger. Silence didn't mean safety. She learned that the hard way. Finally, Reyes crouched beside her, sweat streaking the dirt on his face. "We got 'em spooked. Convoy's intact." He gave her a quick grin, then tilted his head. "You all right? You froze for a second back there." Her chest tightened. She couldn't answer that honestly. "Just recalibrating," she muttered. But Reyes's eyes narrowed. He'd known her too long. He could read the shift in her even when she hid it from the rest. "You sure?" he pressed. Alina forced her voice steady. "Yeah, I'm fine." The words tasted like ash in her mouth. They regrouped, descending the ridge to link up with the convoy. Engines idled low, headlights casting long shadows over the dirt. Soldiers climbed down, tense, checking weapons. The air stank of oil and burned powder. A lieutenant approached Alina, saluting sharp. "Convoy reports minimal damage, no casualties." She returned the nod, professional, efficient, exactly what they needed her to be. But inside, her pulse hammered, because even as the lieutenant rattled off details, she wasn't listening. She was replaying that moment, that sound. A voice calling her name where no voice should have been. When the convoy rolled again, pushing deeper toward the valley, her team took up escort positions. Alina fell back into her role: overwatch, coordination, command. The rhythm of it steadied her hands but not her thoughts. Every step forward felt like walking towards something she couldn't stop. Hours later, the convoy halted at a temporary staging point. The soldiers moved with tired precision, securing the perimeter, setting up comms. Fires flickered low, pushing back the dark. Alina sat alone near the edge of camp, her rifle resting across her knees. The valley stretched below, quiet now, moonlight painting the ridges silver. She should have been resting, eating, conserving strength. Instead, her thoughts spiraled back, years back to the moment this secret had taken root. Afghanistan 18 months ago, a mission gone wrong, a man left behind. His name, Captain Nathan Hale. Her commanding officer, her closest ally, the one person who had seen past her silence, who had pushed her harder and trusted her more than anyone else. And the one they had declared dead. But she had heard him, once, on a scrambled frequency months after that mission ended, a voice half buried in static, his voice. She hadn't told anyone, not command, not her team. She couldn't. To believe him alive was to call the entire chain of command into question. To chase a ghost was to abandon the mission in front of her. So she had kept it, carried it, alone. Until tonight, when that voice had returned. "Alina." The whisper cut into the night air, not from her headset this time, from behind her. She spun, rifle up, only to find Reyes standing there, hands raised. "Easy," he said softly, "it's me." Her breath caught, chest rising and falling fast. She lowered the rifle, ashamed of how quick she'd been to turn it on her own. "You're wound tight tonight," Reyes muttered, lowering himself to sit beside her. For a while he didn't say anything, just sat, shoulders brushing hers, staring at the valley. Finally, "You know you can tell me if something's off, right?" Alina's throat closed. She wanted to tell him. She wanted to hand over the weight she'd been carrying, split it in half, let someone else bear it. But the risk was too high. If she said his name, if she admitted what she'd heard, Reyes would have no choice. He'd report it. And then the mission would fracture before it even reached its target. So she shook her head. "Just the usual pre-mission static, I'll clear it." Reyes studied her face for a long moment. Then he sighed, leaning back on his hands. "You're a terrible liar." She almost laughed, almost. But instead she whispered, "And you're too observant for your own good." The silence stretched between them, heavy but not empty. For just a moment she let herself feel it, companionship, trust. the rare comfort of not being entirely alone. But it couldn't last, not with what was coming. When Reyes finally stood to leave, she stayed behind, staring at the valley. She thought of Nathan Hale, of the promise she had made when the reports came back, when the command signed his death into paper. A promise to find out the truth, to never stop looking. And now that promise stood on the edge of colliding with everything she was sworn to do. Hours later, before dawn, the mission shifted. Recon drones picked up unusual movement deeper in the valley, too organized for civilians, too fast to be coincidence. Command wanted confirmation. Elena's team was tasked with moving forward, eyes on target, no engagement unless ordered. She gave the hand signal. They moved out, boots crunching softly on gravel, rifle steady. The pre-dawn chill bit through their uniforms. Every shadow looked alive. Every sound carried weight. As they pushed into the valley, Elena's mind played tricks. Branches cracked underfoot too loud. Wind hissed through rocks too much like whispers, and then faint again, almost too soft to trust, her name. Ash. She froze mid-step. Her team halted behind her, confused. Reyes' voice hissed in her ear. What is it? She scanned the ridgeline, eyes straining. Nothing but rock and shadow. But she knew. Somewhere out there someone was calling her. Someone no one else believed still existed. And if she followed that voice, she might find him. But at what cost? What was she walking toward? A target or a ghost? The valley floor stretched ahead, pale under the thinning night. Rocks glistened faintly with dew, shadows deepening between ridges like waiting mouths. Elena led the file, her steps measured, precise. Each movement calculated, but her mind wasn't still. The voice hadn't returned since she froze on that ridge, but silence was no comfort. Silence only amplified her doubt. Had she imagined it? Combat stress, sleep deprivation, old wounds stirring at the worst possible moment. Or worse, had she actually heard him, and if so, what did that mean for this mission? Her team trusted her. Reyes at her back, Diaz covering their flank, Chen checking their six. Good soldiers, better people. They believed she was steady, unshakable, exactly the captain they needed in the field. But if they knew what haunted her, what she was chasing in the dark, they'd see the cracks. Contact right, Reyes' low whisper cut her thoughts. Elena dropped into a crouch instantly, rifle raised. Her scope scanned the ridge to their right, shadows shifting, movement low, too deliberate to be animals. She gave the hand signal, hold. They froze, breaths shallow, bodies still as stone. The shapes on the ridge moved again, two, maybe three figures, slinking along the slope. They weren't wearing uniforms, but the way they carried their weapons left no doubt. Militia. Elena's chest tightened. Their orders were clear: observe, confirm, no engagement unless compromised. But these figures were closing fast, straight toward the convoy's route. If they didn't intercept. Her finger tightened against the trigger guard. Then the voice came again. Closer. Clearer. Elena. Her whole body locked. It wasn't in her headset. It wasn't in her head. It was in the valley air itself, carried faint on the wind. Captain. The rifle nearly slipped from her grip. Her throat closed, pulse hammering so loud she was sure the team could hear it. Reyes' whisper snapped through the comms. Cap, orders. She should have said hold fire. She should have said track them, report in. But the words tangled against the weight in her chest. Because the voice wasn't random. It wasn't some stranger in the dark. It was him, Nathan Hale. She'd know it anywhere. And in that instant, two truths collided. The mission's orders and the promise she'd carried for 18 months. Her silence stretched too long. Reyes shifted, concern bleeding into his voice. Elena, what are we doing? Her mouth was dry. She forced the words out. Shadow them, stay low, no noise. They moved. The figures ahead disappeared into a ravine, slipping like ghosts into deeper shadow. Elena followed, her team close behind, hearts pounding in unison. Every crunch of gravel beneath their boots sounded deafening. Every breath risked giving them away. The ravine narrowed, walls closing in. Alina pressed against the rock, eyes sweeping the dark. She caught flashes of movement ahead, torches, faint glows of light deeper in the gorge. Then she saw it. Not militia, not just militia. A camp. Hidden in the valley floor, shielded by ridges, was a cluster of makeshift tents and crates. Equipment stolen, weapons stacked. A staging ground, no doubt. The kind of place command needed eyes on. But Alina barely registered any of it. Her gaze locked on a figure at the camp's edge, standing near a lantern glow. Tall, broad-shouldered, uniform tattered but recognizable, his face gaunt, his beard heavy but his posture, his eyes undeniable. Nathan Hale. Alive. Her breath hitched so sharp it hurt. Her knees nearly buckled. She gripped the rock wall, nails biting into the stone just to steady herself. 18 months of silence, of being told she was wrong, of carrying a ghost, and now, right here, the ghost stood flesh and blood before her. Reyes whispered at her side, "What the hell is that?" He trailed off, his voice cracked. "That's Hale, that's—" "Shut up," Alina hissed, too sharp, too fast. Reyes recoiled, eyes wide. She couldn't let him say it, couldn't let the others hear. Not yet, not until she understood. Down below, Hale moved with the militia like he belonged. He spoke with them, gestures sharp, commanding. The sight sliced her in half. Because if he was alive, why was he here? Her heart screamed one truth: he had survived. He had called for help. He hadn't been lost. But her eyes saw another truth: he was with them now, moving among them, speaking like one of them. Reyes's whisper came again, tight with disbelief. "Cap, if that's him, what the hell is he doing?" She didn't answer, she couldn't. Her mind swirled, her chest burning. This was the moment she'd sworn to reach, the proof that her promise wasn't built on madness. Nathan Hale was alive. But the price of that truth cut deeper than she'd imagined. If command saw this, if her team reported it, Hale wouldn't be rescued. He'd be executed, declared a traitor. Another casualty, this time with dishonor. Her throat closed. The weight of her secret pressed heavier than ever. Reyes's eyes locked on hers, searching. "Talk to me, Alina." She shook her head. Words failed. All she could whisper was, "Not here, not now." The team held position, watching the camp from the ridge. Hale disappeared into a tent. The militia settled around fires, weapons close. The night deepened, heavy with the smell of smoke and the sharp bite of tension. Alina lay prone, scope trained, but her eye blurred. She wasn't looking at enemies. She was looking at the man who had once told her on their first deployment together, "You don't break under weight. You carry it until it bends to you." Now she wondered if he had broken after all. Hours passed. Dawn began to gray the edges of the sky. Command's voice finally crackled through comms. "Team Ash, report status." Alina's throat locked. Her finger hovered over the transmit switch. "Report it, tell them about the camp, tell them what you saw." But to say Hale's name out loud was to condemn him. Reyes's hand brushed her arm, subtle, grounding. His whisper carried weight. "Alina, you can't sit silent forever." She closed her eyes. The voice of her colonel echoed in her head from that first briefing. "Your team will have the high ground." But she wasn't sure she did anymore. With a trembling breath, she pressed the switch. "Command, this is Ash. Eyes on hostile camp, approximately 30 fighters, equipment cache, coordinates transmitting." She stopped. Her voice wavered. The next words perched on the edge of her tongue like blades. "Do you say his name? Do you betray the promise? Do you let them know?" "Over," she forced out instead. Static, then, "Copy Ash, maintain overwatch, do not engage, stand by for further orders." The line went dead. Reyes stared at her, eyes sharp. He knew. He had seen Hale too, and he knew she'd chosen silence. When the team rotated watch positions, Alina stayed prone, refusing to rest. Her body ached, her eyes burned, but she wouldn't close them. Because the moment she did, the questions would consume her. Was Nathan Hale alive? Or was he gone already, buried beneath whatever man now stood among the enemy? And when the moment came to choose, mission or promise, who would she betray first? Why did silence feel heavier than gunfire? The camp below stirred with the first light of dawn. Smoke rose from dying fires, curling into the pale sky. Figures moved, slow, methodical, carrying crates, checking weapons. And inside one of those canvas tents, the man everyone believed dead was alive. Alina's scope trembled against her shoulder. Her finger rested along the trigger guard, steady by habit, but her chest refused to match that calm. Reyes lay beside her, one eye pressed to his own scope. He didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was quiet, careful. "You knew, didn't you?" The words hit like a strike. Alina's lips parted, but no sound came. Reyes didn't look away from his rifle. "You didn't react like the rest of us. When you saw him, it wasn't shock, it was recognition." Her throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, to deflect, to push the truth back down where she had buried it for months. But Reyes knew her too well, and his tone wasn't accusatory, it was hurt. "I heard him once," she whispered finally. "Months ago, a broken transmission. Everyone else wrote it off as static. I knew it was him, I knew." Reyes closed his eyes briefly, jaw flexing. "And you said nothing." The sting in his voice was worse than any rebuke command could have given. "I couldn't," she murmured. "If I had been wrong, they'd call me unstable. If I had been right," her voice cracked, "they'd do exactly what they're going to do now." Reyes lowered his rifle, turning to face her fully. His eyes burned with disbelief. "Do you hear yourself? You carried this alone, for 18 months. Alina couldn't meet his gaze. She fixed her eyes on the camp below, on the faint shape of Hale's silhouette moving through the canvas wall of the tent. "He was my Reyes," she said softly. "He believed in me when no one else did. I owed him more than a line in a file. I owed him the truth." Reyes shook his head, whispering harsh. "And what about us? What about your team? You don't owe us the truth." The words cut, because he was right. She had carried this alone, not because she didn't trust them, but because she couldn't bear to drag them into the fire of it. Before she could answer, the comms crackled. Command's voice, sharp and cold. "Ash, confirm your transmission. Estimated 30 hostiles, equipment cache. Coordinates received. Stand by for fire mission." Alina's stomach lurched. Fire mission, airstrike. She pressed her lips together, the headset pressing hot against her ear. Command was about to erase the camp, erase Hale. Reyes's gaze snapped to hers. He saw the flicker in her eyes, the tension locking her jaw. His whisper was almost a plea. "Alina, don't you dare." Her hand hovered over the comm switch. She could tell them. She could shout into the line right now, "Nathan Hale is alive. Stop the strike. Delay it. Force them to acknowledge him." But to do that would expose her secret. Expose the months of silence, the disobedience, the withheld truth. "Stand by," she said finally, her voice tight. Static filled her ear. Then copy, fire mission in 60 seconds. Her chest clenched. She snapped her scope back to the camp. Hale emerged from the tent, squinting against the gray dawn. His shoulders were heavier, his movements slower, but his posture was unmistakable. He wasn't a prisoner. He wasn't shackled or guarded. He moved among them like one of them. Her breath caught. "Why, Nathan? Why are you standing there?" The radio timer ticked in her head. 40 seconds. She whispered without meaning to, "He's alive." Reyes flinched, alive and standing with the enemy. His whisper was harsh, pained. "You don't know what he is anymore, Alina. None of us do." 30 seconds. Alina's scope followed Hale as he barked an order to one of the militia, pointing toward a crate. The man obeyed without hesitation. Her stomach twisted. The Nathan Hale she remembered wouldn't have blended in like this. wouldn't have stood silent while weapons were loaded, wouldn't have been here at all. 20 seconds. Alina, Reyes pressed, his voice cracked. If you stop this strike, if you shield him, you risk everything. Your team, the mission, all of it. 10 seconds. Her finger twitched on the comm switch. Every second screamed in her head. The man who had once saved her career, her sanity, her belief in herself, stood alive but unrecognizable. And command was about to turn him into fire and smoke. Impact in 5-4. Her throat closed, her breath trembled. 3. She shut her eyes. 2. Her finger lifted off the comm switch. 1. The valley split open. The first explosion tore the ground apart, a thunderous crack that shook the ridge beneath her. Fire bloomed upward, a wave of dust and heat punching against her chest. The camp below erupted, tents shredded, crates splintered, figures thrown like rag dolls. Her scope shook as more detonations followed, a chain of fire ripping the valley floor into chaos. Smoke billowed, flames licked the sky, screams drowned beneath the roar. And in the middle of it, Nathan Hale. Alina's breath hitched as she tracked him through the haze. He staggered, thrown by the blast, but he was still standing, still alive. Her heart leapt and then collapsed, because the look on his face as he turned his head toward the ridge was not fear, it was recognition. He knew he had seen them. And for one fleeting second, their eyes met across the distance, through smoke and fire. Then the flames swallowed him. The airstrike ended as suddenly as it began. Silence crashed down, broken only by the crackle of fire. The camp was rubble, twisted metal, and charred earth. Reyes lowered his rifle slowly, eyes hollow. It's done. Alina's chest heaved, her vision blurring. Her hands trembled against the scope. Done. The word felt like a lie. Because she knew, Nathan Hale wasn't gone, not yet. And if he had survived that, then the line between soldier and traitor had just been burned away. Reyes looked at her, his expression unreadable, but his voice was sharp, certain. You better start telling me everything, Alina, because whatever secret you've been carrying, this just got bigger than both of us. She opened her mouth, but no words came, only the weight of ash filling her lungs. The valley still smoked. Ash drifted like gray snow, clinging to the ridge where Alina and Reyes lay hidden. The roar of the airstrike had faded, leaving behind an echoing silence more deafening than the explosions themselves. Alina's heart hadn't slowed. It pounded against her ribs, each beat reminding her of what she'd seen through her scope. Hale, battered but alive, eyes locking with hers across the inferno. That moment had seared into her memory, immovable, undeniable. Reyes exhaled heavily, adjusting his rifle but not looking at her. Command thinks it's over. His tone carried a weight she'd never heard before. Not anger, not accusation, something quieter, something heavier. They'll mark the site as cleared, he went on. Count it as another success, another set of numbers on a screen. He finally turned his head, his gaze pinning her. But you know it isn't over. Her throat tightened. She didn't answer because silence was safer. Silence had carried her this far, but silence now was also dangerous. Reyes wasn't blind. He wasn't stupid. He had seen her hesitate before the strike. He had seen the tremor in her hand, the restraint in her voice. He already knew. Alina, his voice was soft, but it cut like steel. You saw him, didn't you? In that fire, you saw him alive. Her lips parted, but no words formed. The truth pressed against her chest, demanding release. But if she let it out, if she spoke his name, it would change everything. Reyes leaned closer, lowering his voice to a whisper that carried more force than any shout. Stop protecting ghosts. You owe me the truth. Her hands trembled, but she clenched them tight against the dirt. She couldn't run anymore, not from Reyes. I saw him, she whispered. The air between them seemed to snap. Reyes's eyes hardened, but his jaw tightened like he had already expected her answer. Damn it, he muttered, dragging a hand across his face. Damn it, Alina. She turned her gaze back to the valley, to the smoldering ruins where black smoke curled upward. Her voice shook. He survived the blast. I don't know how, but I know what I saw. He looked straight at me. Reyes stared at her, his disbelief laced with a bitterness she couldn't stand. And what the hell do you think that means? That he's still the man you knew? That he's still on our side? The words stabbed deep. She wanted to argue, to insist Hale was still the leader who had once lifted her out of despair, the one who had taught her discipline, purpose, and strength. But the image of him barking orders at militia fighters gnawed at her. She whispered instead, I don't know. Reyes's silence was worse than anger. It was heavy, suffocating, filled with 100 unspoken thoughts he didn't trust himself to say. Finally, the comms crackled again. Command's voice, detached and clinical. Ash, confirm battle damage assessment. Secondary sweep not required. Return for debrief. Alina's throat went dry. A debrief meant questions, reports, eyes searching for cracks in her story. She forced her voice steady, replying, copy, returning. The radio clicked off, leaving them alone again. Reyes broke the silence first, his tone sharp. What's your play? Her brow furrowed. What? You can't just walk back into base, file your report, and pretend none of this happened. Not when you saw him survive. He leaned in closer, voice low. So tell me, are you going to tell them? Her chest clenched. The answer was simple in theory. She should report it. That was her duty. But saying those words meant exposing her months of silence, her withheld suspicions, her failure to act sooner. If she told the truth now, she would burn with it. I can't, she admitted softly. Reyes's jaw tightened. Then you're making me complicit. Her stomach twisted. Reyes. No, his voice was sharper now, angry, but beneath it trembled something else. You don't get to drag me into this blind. If you're keeping his secret, then you're keeping mine too, and I didn't ask for that. She bit her lip, guilt crawling up her throat. He was right. She hadn't just carried this burden alone. She had forced it onto him the moment he saw the truth in her eyes. Her voice cracked. I never wanted to put this on you. But you did, he snapped. Then softer, almost broken, because you trusted him more than you trust me. The words hit harder than any bullet could have. She stared at him, stunned, the ache in her chest unbearable. That's not true, she whispered. He shook his head, laughing bitterly. Isn't it? You held on to this for months. You saw signs, you heard whispers, and you stayed silent, not to protect me, not to protect the team, to protect him. Her eyes burned. She wanted to deny it, to fight it, but the truth was tangled, messy, undeniable. Before she could answer, movement stirred below. Alina froze, snapping her scope back to the valley floor. Through the smoke, figures emerged. Not all of the militia had been killed. A handful stumbled through the ruins, coughing, dragging weapons, and among them. Her breath stopped. Nathan Hale. His uniform was scorched, torn, caked in soot. His face was bloodied, his eyes sharp with fury. But he was alive, more than alive. He was leading them, shouting orders, rallying survivors like nothing had broken. Alina's blood turned to ice. Reyes swore under his breath, You've got to be kidding me. Hale raised his arm, signaling toward the ridge, toward them. Alina's heart slammed against her ribs. He had seen them again. Reyes jerked his rifle up. We can end this now. His finger hovered over the trigger, his voice cold. Say the word, Alina. One shot, clean, over. Her breath caught. Every instinct screamed at her to stop him, to shield Hale from that bullet. But another voice in her head whispered louder. If you protect him now, you prove Reyes right. You prove you've already chosen your side. Her hands trembled, her throat burned. Take the shot, she forced out, her voice hoarse. Reyes's eyes flicked to her, surprise flashing in them. But he didn't hesitate, his scope aligned, finger tightening. The shot cracked through the air. Alina's scope tracked the bullet's path, straight for Hale. But at the last second, a militia fighter stumbled into the line of fire, the round tearing through him instead. He crumpled to the ground, dead before he hit the dirt. Hale turned, eyes narrowing, scanning the ridge with deadly precision. "Damn it," Reyes hissed, chambering another round. But before he could fire again, return shots echoed from below. Bullets whistled past, pinging off the rocks. "They know where we are," Reyes barked. "We need to move." Alina's heart thundered. She crawled back from the ridge, dirt scraping her elbows, smoke stinging her eyes. Reyes was right behind her, curses spilling under his breath. As they scrambled through the rocks, Alina risked one last glance back. Hale stood in the ruins, eyes locked on the ridge, his expression unreadable. But in the faintest tilt of his head, in the way his gaze lingered too long, she felt it. He knew. He knew she was there. And he wasn't finished with her. The rain came that night. It started as a whisper on the rocks, a faint patter that almost sounded like relief after the firestorm that had consumed the valley. But relief never came. The drops grew heavier, thickening into sheets that washed ash over the earth and smeared blood into black streaks. Alina lay under the canvas of a hastily pitched tarp, listening to every sound as if it could betray them. Each raindrop was a drumbeat against her nerves. Her rifle lay at arm's reach, her pack beneath her head, but she wasn't resting. Sleep wouldn't come. Not after seeing him again. Not after Hale had looked at her through the smoke. Reyes sat a few feet away, hunched over his gear, stripping his rifle by touch in the dark. The dim glow of a chemlight cut sharp lines across his face, making the fatigue etch their look even older, deeper. He hadn't spoken much since their escape from the ridge. Not to her, not about what they'd both seen. But silence wasn't protection anymore. It was a time bomb. Alina's chest ached with it. She wanted to ask what he was thinking. She wanted to say something that might make the weight between them lighter, but every word she imagined seemed doomed to make it worse. Finally, Reyes broke it. His voice was flat, low. "Command confirmed kill count. Logged Hale as KIA, case closed." The words landed like stone. Alina stared at him, the tension in her throat rising like a tide. "They're wrong." He snapped the bolt back into his rifle, the metallic click sharp in the dark. "They're lying. Difference is they know it." Her breath caught. "You think they?" "I think they already suspected." His voice was bitter, each word clipped. "You saw how fast they shut it down. No secondary sweep. No confirmation. They don't want Hale's ghost hanging over this mission, so they erased him." Her stomach twisted. Command didn't erase things lightly. If they were burying Hale, it wasn't to protect her. It was to protect themselves. Reyes shoved the rifle aside and leaned back, his head thumping against the tarp pole. Rain hammered overhead, filling the silence with a constant roar. "So tell me, Ash, what's the play? You keep quiet, Command gets their neat little report. We walk away, mission intact. Or," he turned his head, eyes drilling into hers, "you blow it open. You tell them Hale is alive. And then what? You burn with him." Her chest clenched. The choice was as sharp as a blade pressed to her throat. Stay silent, and she became complicit in Command's cover-up. Speak out, and she became their scapegoat. Her voice was barely a whisper. "What if he comes back?" Reyes stared at her. No sarcasm, no fire, just a quiet, haunted look. "He already has." She shut her eyes, her pulse racing. He was right. Hale hadn't died in the valley. He hadn't disappeared into the shadows. He had looked at her, recognized her, spared her. That wasn't a ghost. That was a promise. A crackle broke through the comms, sharp against the rain. Both of them froze. "Echo team, status check." Command's voice calm, detached, routine. Reyes grabbed the handset, his tone professional. "Green. Ridge cleared, returning with Ash." "Copy." A pause, then. "Ash confirm." Alina swallowed hard. Her voice had to sound steady, normal. She clicked on. "Ash green." Static hissed, then silence. No questions. No requests for detail, just a void where doubt should have lived. Reyes set the comms down slowly, his jaw tightened. See, they don't even want to hear it, they already know what answer they want. Alina stared at the radio, bile rising in her throat. It was worse than denial. It was manipulation. They weren't blind to the truth, they were building a lie strong enough to bury it. The rain hammered harder, drowning the earth, drowning her thoughts. She hugged her knees to her chest, trying to contain the storm inside her. And then a sound cut through the night. Not rain, not thunder, something heavier, boots in mud. Her breath stopped. Reyes was already moving, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the darkness. We're not alone. Shapes emerged through the sheets of rain, half a dozen, maybe more. Silhouettes trudging uphill, weapons slung. Militia survivors. And at the center, unmistakable even through the downpour, Nathan Hale. Alina's heart slammed against her ribs. He looked carved from stone, rain slicking his face, his eyes burning through the storm. He wasn't stumbling. He wasn't running. He was moving with purpose, step by deliberate step, straight toward them. Reyes hissed through his teeth. How the hell? She grabbed his arm before he could fire. Her voice shook. Wait. He whipped his head toward her, disbelief etched deep. Wait, you've lost your damn mind. But she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Hale's presence rooted her in place, pulling her toward him and pushing her away all at once. Through the rain, his gaze locked on hers, and then just for a moment he lifted his hand, not in threat, not in command, in recognition. Like he'd come for her. Alina's body betrayed her. She stood. Reyes swore under his breath, "What are you doing?" Her voice cracked. "He's not here to kill us." The militia raised their weapons. Reyes dropped to a knee, rifle snapping into position. His finger tightened on the trigger. But Hale raised his arm, barking an order Alina couldn't hear through the rain, and the militia froze. Guns lowered. The storm swallowed the silence that followed. Reyes's eyes flicked between her and Hale, fury blazing. "You've got 5 seconds to explain why I shouldn't pull this trigger right now." Her chest heaved, every muscle shaking. She couldn't explain it, not to Reyes, not to herself, but she knew, in her bones, in the marrow of her regret. Hale wasn't here for blood, he was here for her. And if she said the wrong thing now, if she let Reyes fire, she would never know why. "Don't," she whispered. Reyes's face twisted, betrayal raw and sharp. But before he could answer, Hale stepped closer, his voice finally cutting through the storm. "Alina." Her name, his voice. After all this time, it hit her like a strike to the chest. Reyes froze, stunned. "He knows your name." Alina's breath shattered in her throat. She had spent months preparing for this moment, denying it, burying it. And now, under the rain, there it was. The weight of her secret, no longer silent. Hale stood before her, alive, undeniable, unbroken. And behind him, the militia watched with something closer to reverence than obedience. Her hesitation wasn't fear. It was the knowledge that whatever came next would burn them all. Why did truth feel heavier than any bullet? The rain had slowed, leaving the valley slick and gleaming under a gray morning sky. Mud clung to boots, rifles, and uniforms alike, dragging every movement into resistance. The remnants of the airstrike smoldered behind them, charred tents smoldering like graves in the valley. Alina kept her eyes fixed on him. Hale, alive, real, standing a dozen yards away, mud and soot streaked across his uniform, weapons at his side, but not in threat, not yet. Her fingers hovered over her rifle, but they weren't shaking from fear. They were trembling with the weight of decisions she'd been avoiding for months. "Why are you here?" she demanded, voice sharp, cutting through the cold air. Hale's gaze didn't waver. He didn't flinch. For a long moment he simply studied her, as though reading every secret she'd buried since that first mission 18 months ago. Then his voice came, low and measured. "I came because you're alive." The words were simple, almost mundane, but in the pause they carried a gravity that made Alina's knees weak. Alive. Not just herself, her heart, her convictions, her burden of truth. She had been carrying him in memory, in silence, in hope. And now he spoke those two words and the weight shifted. Reyes's jaw tightened behind her, eyes scanning every shadow around them. He hadn't lowered his rifle, not for a second. "That's not a conversation you can have," he muttered, almost to himself. Alina's lips pressed together. "You were with them, you commanded them. Why?" Hale exhaled slowly, the sound dragging through the damp air like smoke. "I had no choice." Her chest tightened. "No choice. 18 months. People thought you were dead. We mourned you. You could have called. You could have returned. And now you stand there like nothing happened." "I had to survive," he said. "You wouldn't understand, not yet." Reyes spoke sharply, stepping forward. "Try me. You survived because of us too. Don't act like you did it alone. People died out there. You're not the only one who carried a burden." Hale's eyes flicked toward him. Recognition and maybe respect, but also a cold edge. "I don't need your approval." Alina felt the tension coil in her chest. Both men standing there embodying the weight of loyalty and betrayal in ways she couldn't reconcile. Her own voice shook when she spoke, low and almost a whisper. "Then why me? Why come to me?" Hale's gaze softened just slightly, and for a moment she glimpsed the man she remembered, the mentor, the commander, the ally who had saved her from herself more than once. "Because you kept your promise," he said. "Because you never stopped listening." Her chest ached. Listening hadn't been enough. Watching had not been enough. And yet somehow that small thread of faith between them had held. Reyes stepped closer, tension radiating off him. "What's the plan? Are you going to walk us through why you're still alive, or are we supposed to figure it out while you play Ghost Commander?" Hale's eyes narrowed. "Command already made a choice. They decided I was dead. They erased me from every log, every file. They assumed no one would question it. They assumed you wouldn't know. They assumed wrong." Alina swallowed, the taste of ash in her mouth. Command had lied, but why? And how deep did it go? Hale's next words sliced sharper than any bullet. "You were told to observe. You were told to report. You were not told the truth. And even if I return, even if I survive this valley, the mission won't stop. Not until they've decided what truth is worth keeping and what truth is worth burying." Reyes's hands tightened on his rifle. "So what? We abandon orders. We ignore our chain of command." Hale shook his head. "You follow orders blindly and the dead pile up. You question and you survive." Alina felt the moral weight press down harder than the mud beneath her boots. His words weren't just advice. They were a reflection of every choice she'd made silently for 18 months. The long nights, the whispered suspicions, the balance between mission and conscience. "I never stopped believing you were alive," she whispered. "You didn't," Hale said, and his voice held a hint of awe. "Which is why I found you." Reyes's jaw flexed, a low growl of frustration escaping him. "You're romanticizing this. You know what she's been through. She risked everything carrying your ghost. And now you show up muddy, bloody, and expect, what? Gratitude." Hale's gaze shifted to Alina. "I expect nothing, but the choice you make now will determine more than your conscience." Rain's slicked hair stuck to Hale's forehead as he moved slightly closer. The militia behind him remained in rigid formation, eyes wary, waiting for a signal from the man they now followed like a shadow of command. Alina's heart thudded. Everything she'd trained for, every instinct honed in the field, was screaming that the moment demanded precision. Not in shooting, not in movement, but in thought. Command's fire mission, the destroyed camp, the men lost, it all converged into one truth. The war wasn't just external. The real battlefield was inside her. "Then what do we do?" she asked quietly. Hale tilted his head, the faintest shadow of a smile breaking through the grime on his face. "We survive, and then we find out what was buried, all of it. Every lie, every omission, every command that tried to erase truth." Reyes shook his head, muttering under his breath, "You're insane, absolute." Alina raised a hand to stop him. She looked at Hale, and for the first time, fully at him, taking in the man who had vanished from her world only to reappear with impossible timing. "And if we fail?" Hale's eyes softened. "Then we fail together, but I trust you. You carried the weight for me. Now you'll carry it with me, and maybe, finally, we'll all see what's real." Her chest tightened. She had lived in the shadow of doubt, every mission a step away from breaking under it. But standing here in mud and rain and smoke, Hale's words carved a path forward. Not safety, not certainty, but clarity. Reyes lowered his rifle slightly, though his glare didn't soften. "This is going to get messy." "Messy," Alina whispered, letting the word taste in her mouth. "Yes, but maybe it's the only way to make it right." A small gust of wind swept through the valley, whipping rain into their faces. The militia shuffled, uneasy now, sensing a shift in command they didn't fully understand. Hale's gaze flicked to them, and the silent order passed. "Hold." Alina swallowed, letting the adrenaline settle. She felt the moral lines blur, the loyalty she owed command weigh against the loyalty she owed truth, against the man who had survived, against herself. For the first time in 18 months, she felt the possibility of hope. Not blind hope, not the foolish hope of a soldier waiting for miracles, but the precise, careful hope of someone who had carried weight, who had endured fire, who had survived the impossible. And now, in the rain-soaked valley, she realized, survival wasn't just about living. It was about knowing who you were when everything tried to erase you. Hale stepped forward, close enough now that the rain plastered mud streaks onto his uniform. His eyes held hers. "We move together. One choice, one step, one truth at a time. Are you with me?" Alina's hands ached from gripping her rifle. Her mind raced with the consequences, the secrets, the lives at stake. And yet her voice came steady, low, and unwavering. "I'm with you." Reyes exhaled sharply, frustration giving way to reluctant acceptance. "Guess I don't have a choice either." Hale nodded once sharply. No words, no celebration, just the quiet acknowledgement that the moment demanded more than relief. It demanded resolve. And for Alina, that resolve burned brighter than any fear, heavier than any secret, sharper than any bullet. The valley held its breath, mist curling over the ruins as the trio prepared to step forward. Not as command, not as soldiers bound by protocol, but as humans navigating a world where truth had been buried, promises had been tested, and survival was only the beginning. Sometimes, Alina thought, survival wasn't about avoiding fire. It was about carrying its memory, learning from it, and deciding who you were in the ashes. Why did the quiet feel louder than the storm? The valley lay in gray silence. Smoke curled from the ruined camp like the memory of fire. Rain had washed the worst of the ash away, leaving the ground slick and cold, every step a reminder of what had been lost. Alina stood at the ridge, looking down at the ruins. Mud clung to her boots, her uniform soaked, her hands shaking, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of months finally pressing down on her. She could feel every choice she had made, every secret she had carried, every life balanced on the edge of her silence. Behind her, Reyes was quiet. No words, no complaints, only the low hum of restrained anger and relief mingling in the space between them. He had survived this storm with her, carried the truth as it unfolded, and now watched as she faced the final moment of reckoning. Hale stood below, a shadow against the gray landscape, mud streaked across his uniform, face bloodied but eyes unbroken. He had survived the impossible. He had endured the lies, the fire, the silence. And now he waited, not for vengeance, not for orders, but for understanding. Alina swallowed, her throat tight. Every instinct screamed at her to act, to speak, to break the silence that had defined her life for 18 months. And yet, when she opened her mouth, no words came. Only the echo of the rain, the memory of the firestorm, the gaze of the man she had once trusted completely. "Do you know why I survived?" Hale's voice was low, carrying over the slick valley floor over the ghosts of the camp. Alina's heart thumped, and she shook her head, unable to trust herself to speak. "Because someone never gave up on me," he continued, eyes finding hers again. "Someone remembered who I was, who I could be. Someone stayed silent but stayed vigilant. That's why I'm here." Alina's chest burned. She had stayed silent, yes, but not out of ignorance or weakness. Out of loyalty. Out of the belief that truth could be preserved carefully until the right moment. And now the right moment had arrived, though not without cost. Reyes stepped closer, voice low, almost a growl. "You're going to tell us everything, or we walk away and report what we know." Hale shook his head. "There are layers here you don't understand. Lies aren't always convenient. Sometimes they're necessary to survive long enough to reveal the truth." Alina felt the weight of those words sink into her chest. She had lived under the constant pressure of knowing, carrying, hiding. She had chosen silence, not out of cowardice, but because the world demanded survival before revelation. And now she understood that survival didn't just mean staying alive. It meant carrying the consequences of what you saw, what you knew, and what you were willing to fight for. "Then we move," she said finally, her voice steady, strong despite the tremor in her hands. "Together, one step at a time, one truth at a time." Hale nodded once sharply. "Good, but be aware truth isn't always neat, and the cost of survival can be measured in ways we don't anticipate." Reyes exhaled sharply, frustration giving way to reluctant understanding. "Then let's get it over with," he muttered, eyes scanning the valley for any remaining threats. Alina followed Hale down the slick slope, mud squelching beneath her boots. Every step felt like a confession, every breath a release of months of pent-up tension. The militia had dispersed after Hale's command, leaving only the three of them in the remnants of the camp, the world around them eerily quiet except for the distant drip of water from shattered tents and trees. They reached the center of the ruins. Charred timbers jutted from the mud, twisted metal glinting in the dim light. Alina knelt, brushing ash from the remains of a collapsed tent, remembering the lives that had been lost. She felt the sting of guilt, sharp and bitter, but also the strange relief of finally standing in the aftermath, witnessing what she had preserved through vigilance and silence. Hale knelt beside her. He didn't touch her, didn't speak. He simply surveyed the ruins with a calm that bordered on reverence. For a moment, the two of them existed in silence, connected by the shared knowledge of fire, survival, and hidden truths. Reyes approached cautiously, scanning the perimeter one last time before lowering his rifle. "So," he said finally, voice dry, "what now? We just report it. Tell them the truth about the mission, about Hale." Alina shook her head. "No, we survive first, and then we decide what to reveal. The right moment will come. Not now, not under their eyes, not when lies are still stronger than fact." Hale nodded, and for the first time Alina felt a quiet shift in the air, as if the valley itself had exhaled. "Then you understand. You've carried the weight with me, and now you carry it with purpose. The mission isn't over. The truth isn't over, but we are still alive, and that is more than most can claim." Reyes exhaled, tension easing slightly. "Surviving isn't the same as winning," he muttered almost to himself, "but it's the first step." Alina felt the words settle in her chest, resonating like a pulse. She had survived. She had carried the burden. And now she had the chance to turn that survival into action, into clarity, into something larger than herself. The three of them stood amid the ruins, the rain slowing to a drizzle, the valley quiet and reflective. Mud, ash, and soot clung to them like memories they could never shake. And yet in that quiet there was a strange beauty, a reminder that life persisted even in devastation, that truth could endure even when buried, and that strength was found not only in action, but in the courage to carry what others could not. Hale looked at her, a faint smile breaking through the grime and exhaustion. "Sometimes Survival isn't just about what you do to live. It's about what you carry with you and who you choose to carry it with. Alina swallowed, feeling the weight of every hidden secret, every night spent wrestling with doubt, every silent act of vigilance. She had carried it alone, but now she wasn't alone. Not with Hale, not with Reyes, not with the truth standing before her, raw and undeniable. She looked at the valley one last time. The firestorm had ended, the airstrike had passed, the ashes were still warm beneath her fingertips. But the world beyond the ridge waited, full of choices, full of consequences, full of the unknown. And she was ready. Reyes broke the silence, voice low but steady. "Well, Ash, guess this is where the fun starts." Alina couldn't help the faint, wry smile that tugged at her lips. "Fun isn't the word I'd use," she said softly. Hale's gaze met hers, unflinching, quiet, and resolute. "Neither is survival, but it's enough for now." She let the silence stretch, letting the rain fall, letting the ash settle, letting the valley hold its memory of fire. The weight of her secret, once a chain, now felt like a mantle, heavy, yes, but purposeful. And as the clouds parted just enough to let a pale shaft of sunlight hit the mud and ruins, Alina felt the smallest flicker of hope. Not the naive hope of youth, not the blind hope of dreams untouched by fire, but the sharp, precise hope of someone who had survived, who had endured, who had seen the impossible and still stood ready to face what came next. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. She understood that now. She understood that standing in the ruins, soaked, bruised, and tired, she had acted. She had carried the truth. And now she would move forward, carrying it not as a burden but as a torch. The valley whispered around her, wind through broken timbers, water trickling over mud, a quiet reminder that even in devastation, life persisted. She drew a breath, steadying herself. Reyes flinched slightly as Hale reached out, not in command, not in challenge, but as an acknowledgement of trust. Alina accepted the gesture, a simple nod passing between them, a recognition of what had been endured and what must come next. They moved together from the ridge, careful steps through mud and ash, toward the unknown beyond the valley, toward missions unwritten, toward choices that could no longer be deferred. And as Alina walked, she realized that survival was not the end. It was the beginning of something larger, an unbroken chain of conscience, courage, and quiet strength. For the first time in 18 months, she felt it fully, alive, unafraid, responsible, free. The valley receded behind them, a testament to fire survived, secrets carried, and truths yet to be fully revealed. And in that quiet, she let herself feel something she had thought lost: hope.